Welcome to this full recap of the Danisa Denmark Open 2020, part of the HSBC BWF World Tour. The tournament is a Super 750 tournament, and without further ado, let's get straight to it. First, let's set things straight. This year's edition of the Danisa Denmark Open was a Super 750 tournament in terms of prize money, in terms of world ranking, and in terms of the organization. In terms of strength of participation, it was clearly way lower, just like we saw it before the era of the Premier Super Series and the HSBC World Tour and the player commitment regulations. Most importantly was that Denmark Open got the badminton restarted, the HSBC World Tour restarted. In this episode, we're going to take a look at the following topics. Jan Jorgensen earlier this summer announced his retirement from the Danish national team, but how fitting was it that he could have his last dance at his home tournament in Odense, the tournament he won back in 2010. Then we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the 5 disciplines, who won and what was the reason that they actually could take the victory here in Denmark Open. In Sorry We Disturbed, we take a look at some of the players or pairs that I had higher expectations for, but who left the tournament way too early. In top 3 takeaways, it's my totally subjective opinion on the 3 most obvious things to remember from the Danisa Denmark Open. And then in Say What, we take a look into some interesting quotes from the tournament. So Jan Jorgensen has now retired as an international player. I had the pleasure of being the national coach when Jan joined the national team in Copenhagen way back in 2004-2005. I also had the pleasure of coaching him in Malaysia Open 2012 when he beat Lindan for the first time in his career. A career that is marked by great wins in Indonesia Open 2014, a tournament that no other European had ever won, and also in 2016 the China Open, also a tournament that no other European had ever won. Winning those 2 tournaments that no European player has ever done before was one of the highlights of his career, but no doubt also the 2016 Thomas Cup tournament where Jan, together with 9 compatriots, finally got the World Championship title to Denmark for the first time ever. That was a fantastic tournament to watch, and I'm thankful that I got to see it live in Kunshan. Jan always had his own style, whether it was different hairdos or his many tattoos. You always got Jan with no filter, very, very easygoing, easy to talk to and get a chat to at whichever tournament you met him throughout the world. I was so lucky to have breakfast a couple of mornings in Odense with Jan, where he told me of his plans for his life after retirement. He's got many interests. He's interested in gaming, in good coffee, good wine, and then of course he'll be at the golf course on the first tee. Actually, the quarterfinal berth came as a little bit of a surprise for him because he had a tee time in a famous golf course near Odense at Friday morning, so he had to cancel that. He's also had his share of adversity throughout his career. He lost his mother at a very young age, and in 2011 he had to withdraw from the World Championships due to heart problems that made his career quite uncertain whether he could continue or not. Luckily, he came back, as we know, but over the years he's been struggling with a number of injuries to his foot. That was a severe one, and on and off with his hip, who eventually I think was the thing that put an end to his illustrious career. Now Jan has moved to Germany together with his wife, who is pursuing her career as a professional handballer in a club just outside of Stuttgart. And Jan, he's of course already made the second team of the local golf club and is eager for more and looking to advance to the first team. So let's look at the 5 different disciplines in the 2020 Danisa Open. We start out with men's singles. Withdrawals from Kento Momota and Kanta Tsuneyama left the top half of the draw with only 2 seats left. That was Rasmus Gemke of Denmark and Kenta Nishimoto of Japan. They both had different ways to semi-final. Gemke was struggling in a couple of his matches against Luis Enrique Peñalba from Spain and Marc Calcio from the Netherlands, whilst Kenta Nishimoto, he was more or less cruising to the semi-final. In the semi-final though, Rasmus Gemke, who before the tournament said that he felt in good shape and he'd taken a step forward, it seemed like he played totally free of pressure. I think he felt he had to reach that semi-final, and my did he play well and defeated Kenta Nishimoto in straight games. The lower part of the draw featured the world rankings number 2 and 3, Zhou Jiantian of Chinese Taipei and Anders Antonsen, the home favorite. It also featured Shrikant Kidambi, who was looking to re-find the game that served him so well back in 2017. Shrikant had 2 matches to find his form before he was facing Chu in the quarterfinal, and I honestly think that his game actually has improved. He's in better shape than he's been for a long while, but on the other hand there wasn't anything really new in his playing style. So after taking the first game against Chu, the player from Chinese Taipei came back, as we've seen him do so many times, and it was 3 games and it was reasonably close in the third, but it was never like you felt that Shrikant was going to win that game. Anders Antonsen had a fairly easy road to his semi-final. He had to retire Janno Jorgensen. That was a difficult match for him emotionally in the quarterfinal, but in the semi-final against Chu, I think he played a really good game plan, kept his patience, and I don't know how much game practice Chu has been making back home in Chinese Taipei, but of course Anders Antonsen could play on the Danish national team with Vittinghus, with Rasmus Gemke, and before Axelsen got surgery on his ankle, so there was also the possibility to practice against him. Anyway, convincing semi-final win for Anders Antonsen to set up a meeting with his childhood friend and neighbor Rasmus Gemke in the final. That's always going to be a difficult match, and it showed that the 2 players had a lot of respect for each other. There were no shouting and cheering in the final, but I also think that Anders Antonsen was actually quite nervous in that match, and in fact all the way up to 19-all in the second game, where it looked as if Rasmus Gemke had the upper hand to take the title. However, 2 easy mistakes from the 7th seed saw the match go into a decider, and there I think Anders Antonsen grew in confidence and could finally take the win after a grueling final. But very well deserved for the young Dane. Both Rasmus Gemke and Anders Antonsen played great tournaments, and of course important for Denmark to finally get a winner on home soil. Last winner back in 2010 was Janno Jorgensen, and there's so many people have been saying, yeah, there were only 3 of top 10 in the world participating in this tournament. Well, that was the case actually also when Janno Jorgensen won back in 2010. We tend to forget that the tournaments back in time, they were also not maximum strength all the time. So all in all, a good week for Denmark in the men's singles department. The drama was all in the top half in the women's singles. The lower half of the draw only saw one 3-game match throughout the whole tournament. In the top of the draw, in the first round, the Danish World Junior Championship silver medalist Line Kristoffersen won the all-Danish encounter against Line Kjærsfeldt and showed some promise for Danish women's badminton. In the next match, Kristoffersen played a really good first part of the first game against Carolina Marin before she was steamrolled by the Olympic champion. And then in the quarterfinal, Marin was made to work hard by Zhang Beiwen from USA. That was a match where Marin was trailing up until the middle of the second game, and that match sort of showed that even though Marin was in great shape and fast and furious, there were also a little bit too many mistakes in her game. The semi-final was against Yvonne Lee, the talented German youngster who sort of overtook Akane Yamaguchi's first seeding as the Japanese woman chose not to travel to Denmark. In the lower half of the draw, Okuhara cruised through the tournament, didn't concede a game in any of her matches, and the break seems to have worked wonders for her. She seems almost as speedy as she was back in 2017 when she won the World Championship. Michelle Lee in the semi-final more or less had to give up against Okuhara because she simply threw everything back what the Canadian hit at her. I don't know if Michelle Lee was nursing a small injury. It looked a little bit like it, but it was an impressive performance by Nozomi Okuhara, and she continued in the final against Marin, where she put so much mental pressure on Marin that the Olympic champion eventually scored a lot of points herself, but she also scored all of Marin's points by overdoing her shots, and that's a sign that Nozomi Okuhara is in really, really good shape. There were of course no new features in her playing style or game plan. Her height and her physicality puts a limit on what she can do, but she's definitely on the road to do what she can do to absolute perfection. In a pre-match interview after the quarterfinal in men's doubles, the Russian former All-England champions Ivanov and Sosunov said that they hoped to play Marcus Ellis and Chris Langridge in the final of the tournament. Well, be careful what you hope for, because the English, they came, saw and conquered in that final, where, in my opinion, the England coach and former winner of this tournament in mixed doubles, Anthony Clark, he really helped his players work their way into the match after losing the first game and eventually take the first title of the year. Ivanov and Sosunov struggled in both the quarterfinal and semi-final of a tournament that was virtually a European championship if you look away from an American pair and a pair from Canada. Inside the draw, it was of course surprising, if not shocking, that Anders Rasmussen and Kim Astrup, the home favorites in men's doubles, lost in the second round to fellow Danish countryman Joel Eibe, the former World Junior Championship silver medalist, teamed up with Rasmus Kjær. There was also a good win for England's second-rated men's doubles, Ben Lane and Sean Vendy, who defeated Mark Lamsfuss and Marvin Seidel from Germany and reached their first semi-final in the Super750 tournament. It was always going to be Japanese in women's doubles. There were some slight hopes that either the European champions, the Stoyeva sisters from Bulgaria, or perhaps the runners-up from Indonesia Masters, Sarthuis and Maiken Fruergaard of Denmark, could put pressure on on one of the two Japanese pairs in the tournament. However, it was actually Chloe Birch and Lauren Smith who were able to put pressure on Fukushima and Hirota when they took them all the way in the quarterfinal and only lost with the narrowest of margin, 21-19 in the decider. Whether that was key to getting Fukushima and Hirota started, I'm not sure, but eventually they went on to win the final and defeat the world champions, the double world champions, Matsumoto and Nakahara, and that was actually the first time in the last 4 tries that Fukushima and Hirota beat their compatriots. Afterwards, in a post-match interview, they said that they hoped that they could meet their fellow compatriots again in the 2021 Olympics in Tokyo, but I have to tell you, I think that they were lying. I think they were hoping for some easier resistance at that time. Mixed doubles was the second discipline in this year's Danisa Denmark Open, where the draw virtually was a European championship. The upper half of the draw saw 3 seeds withdraw, and that pretty much left a freeway for Chris and Gabby Adcock to the final. They struggled though, in my opinion, first against their fellow countrymen Greg Mayers and Jenny Moore. Eventually came through in 3 games, but also in the semi-final against Julienne Maillot and Léa Palermo of France. They were 1 game up, but they were trailing in the second game, managed to finish the match in straight games, but in my opinion, had the French been able to force a decider, I'm not sure the Adcocks would have been able to come back. In the lower half of the draw, there was an all-Danish encounter in the second round where Mathias Christiansen and Alexander Boyer won a very close fought match. In the quarterfinals, they faced Mark Lamsfuss and Isabel Hertrich, a pair that's been playing together for many years, and the Germans, they played a really good tactical game, know their strong concept, strong mixed doubles concept, and defeated the Danes in 3 games. And that meant that in the semi-final they were facing my pre-tournament favorites, Marcus Ellis and Lauren Smith, and again the Germans played magnificently and won in straight games, setting up a final against the Adcocks. Mark Lamsfuss said after the final that they were a little bit nervous going into it against Chris and Gabby Adcock, but after losing the first game there was little doubt that the Germans was actually going to take their first ever victory in a Super 750 tournament. Excellent tournament by Lamsfuss and Hertrich in the mixed doubles. In Sorry We Disturbed, I'm taking a closer look at players or pairs that I had expected to go further in the tournament than they did. Of course, Kim Astrup and Anders Skaarup Rasmussen's defeat to fellow Danish countrymen were a surprise, if not a shock. The 2 players looked shocked in their post-match interview, and they really didn't play a good match against Eipe and Kjær. I think Kim Astrup was nursing a small injury, but anyway, that had not prevented them from winning their first round match. Another player who sort of disappointed me a little bit was the youngster from France, Christophe Popov, the French champion. I'd really looked forward to their first round match against also a youngster, Lakshya Sen from India. That match turned out to be a very easy match for Lakshya Sen, who won in straight games. And then afterwards, Lakshya Sen also makes my Sorry We Disturbed list, as he was in total control against Hans Christian Wittinghus in the second round, but then suddenly in the second game saw his game totally fall apart with mistakes right, left, in the net and out on the back line. So much that the umpire had to ask him if he was okay and then remind him that he should give his best effort. Another Indian player that perhaps didn't totally meet my expectations was Shubhankar Dey, who I had as a dark horse in the lower half of the draw. He could perhaps spell trouble for Shrikant Kidambi. He didn't spell trouble at all except for himself after losing first match to Jason Ho from Canada in straight games. The last pair making the Sorry We Disturbed list is the 5th seeds in mixed doubles, Rodion Alimov and Alina Davletova from Russia. The pair has not won a tournament, has not won a match since they very surprisingly won this Syed Modi Super 300 in late 2019. The pair is obviously very talented, but I'm not really certain that Rodion Alimov is prepared to put in the hard work it takes to take the next step up and be a consistent contender in the World Tour. So on to top 3 takeaways, and the first, number 3, is that it's just so nice that badminton is back. We've missed it for 7 months, and even though it was not a regular strength Super 750 tournament, it was much better than the wait and the reruns of all the old badminton matches that we've seen, at least here in Denmark and on YouTube. Secondly, I think the tournament showed that practice matters and play matters. It's really important to get time to practice and to get in good shape. We saw Nozomi Okuhara, who in my opinion has made the most of these 7 months. We also saw Anders Antonsen, who was rolling out the All England final in a wheelchair, and now he was rolling back with a victory. We saw Rasmus Gemke, who is also in my opinion bettered his game during this period. We've also seen examples that play matters, that the continuous tournament participation, the match practice is really important, and there were some players that in my opinion perhaps lacked that a little bit in Denmark Open. Here I think of for instance the Stoeva sisters, whom I'd expected were able to challenge the 2 Japanese women's doubles pairs a little bit more than was the case in their match, but it's not the only ones. There were several players who looked as if they lacked a little bit match practice. Also Sam McGee and Chloe McGee from Ireland, where the lockdown has been quite severe. So play matters and practice matters. And the last takeaway, we miss the rest of the bunch. We miss China, we miss Malaysia, we miss Korea, we miss the other part of the team from Chinese Taipei, especially Tai Su Ying, and we miss Indonesia with Anthony Ginting, with Praveen Jordan in the mixed doubles, and of course with the minions and the daddies in the men's doubles. We really miss them, and we hope that they're back in January in Thailand for the Asian legs and for the World Tour finals. And a little extra takeaway is of course that Victor Axelsen now can play a men's doubles with either Mohammad Hassan or Hendra Setjevan, and even if he does, they will still be the daddies, because Victor Axelsen became a father to a baby daughter during the Denmark Open. So I guess in no circumstances whatsoever Victor Axelsen would have made an impact on finals day in this tournament, as he of course would have had to attend his child's birth. In the Say What, we take a look at some of the quotes that there were during the tournament, and the most noticeable one came from the Danish TV commentator and former international Jim Laugesen, who was commentating on the match in the first round between Kirsty Gilmore of Scotland, where the lockdown also had been quite severe, and Nozomi Okuhara. Okuhara was totally dominating the first game, and the Danes were talking about how Gilmore must have felt being chased around the court, and Jim Laugesen said, "I know how she feels. She feels like a Scottish Highland sheep being chased by a Scotsman wanting to make haggis of it." Denmark Open was the first tournament played on the World Tour during this COVID-19 pandemic, and it was a really good thing to get badminton started. But we also face a rather uncertain future. There's no more World Tour tournaments in 2020, but hopefully the leg in Thailand with the 2 Super 1000 tournaments and the World Tour finals will be able to go through. Thomas Lund, the General Secretary of BWF, he gave an interview on Danish television where he explained that it was difficult in these COVID-19 times, and that he'd had to change the approach and prepare for a certain scenario. So instead of preparing for one scenario, they were now working with a bunch of different scenarios to cater for different situations affected by the pandemic. So we hope that badminton is able to continue both with the World Tour, but also with the continental tours in Asia and in Europe and in Oceania, Africa and the United States, so that all the players who likes to play international badminton can come out and play in 2021. So if you enjoyed the video, then please subscribe to the channel. Remember to hit the bell also, so that you get notifications whenever there's new videos available. Feel free to follow on Facebook or Twitter, and if you're looking for other badminton resources, I can recommend a vlog by Greg Mayers and Jenny Moore about their life playing badminton internationally, and of course the podcast A Year on Tour with Vittinghus, and the badminton podcast by Jeff and Henry from Australia. Links to that in the descriptions. Bye for now.